Okay, so here we are again, and we're going to be looking at Wombat today. So, again, we have another poem about nature, and I think what differentiates this poem from fireflies and the moths is the way that the persona in this poem is almost interacting with the wombat. So, they're not actually, physically connecting or anything like that, but the persona in the poem is really having connecting more with the persona of the wombat, as opposed to necessarily viewing it from a distance as what we might see in fireflies and the moths. So we start off with a salutation, so a greeting of "Ha there." And again, that's an exclamation, and it's a sense of immediacy that we're again thrown into this situation of a persona coming across this wombat. So it moves into old pig, old bear, old bristly and gingery wombat, out of the red earth peering gingerly. So we have this initial description and repetition of old, and part of that is almost a friendly note in terms of the wombat itself, but we've got these other things that the wombat is similar to. So a pig and a bear. So they're what you might consider to be, a close animal cousin in some sense of the wombat. We have the gingery straight up, which is a part of the physical description, gives us a sense of the colour, so that we have that flowing through the poem. So we start off with gingery, and then later on we have emphasis on red, so that's really looking at the landscape but also looking at the colour of the wombat itself. And that's where out of the red earth peering gingerly. So gingerly is more again has to do with that same colour, but also in gingerly means looking brightly. So, was there some thud of foot in the mist and the silence that stiffens whisker and ear in sound's fierce absence? Some smell means man. So again, we have this looking at what the wombat's actually doing. So the wombat has just popped its head out of the earth, and the persona is wondering, are you looking out because you heard some noise? Are you looking out because it's silent and you're wondering whether there is some danger? Because one of the little annotations to the side, it can hint danger, silence sometimes, because like if there's no sound, it means that something could be going on, that everything's quietening down. But it also has a link to tranquility as well. And then we have the stiffened whisker, and so that's just the wombat being alert, the ears listening out, and all of that kind of stuff as to what it might be. And some smell means man. So we have this connection to the persona, and that is the wombat responding to that as a threat as well. Now you might notice here we have this synesthesia. Now this is just where there is this balance between nature and the surroundings, and that we have here that this wombat is working in synergy with the world around it. It's in sync with nature, and unlike what we are typically as humans, where we tend to be distanced from nature. And we've kind of discussed that before, but again, we're emphasizing here this bringing about and enhancing and heightening nature as something of significant importance. And so then we move on. So I see the dewdrop trembling upon the rushes, all else in the mists now, river, rocks and ridges. So this is where the persona starts looking out into, the wider landscape. Again, it's in first person and it's quite conversational. And we notice this with the use of the alliteration with the river, rocks and ridges, and obviously enhance that with the rushes on the line above. And what that does is it's just really looking out into the landscape and what the persona is seeing. And after those two lines, it goes back to the wombat itself. So poor lump of movable clay, snuffling and blinking, too thick in the head to know what thumps in your thinking, rears in the rain. So this is again, a comparison made. So this poor lump of movable clay. So again, that's a link back to colour and a physical description. Snuffling and blinking, so it's looking around. Too thick in the head. Now, it's not necessarily saying that the wombat is stupid. What it is talking about is looking at the appearance of the wombat. What does it look like? And we all can picture a wombat. They're quite sturdy, quite broad, and you know they are tank-like. So there's that really good comparison there of that appearance there. You know, too thick in the head and lump of clay. So, you know, we tend to think something quite hefty and heavy when it's a lump. It's not something delicate or anything like that. So we get another comparison here, which we haven't seen yet, and that is a really strong and dominant persona, whereas a lot of the other elements of nature that have been explored are quite delicate, angelic, given these divine kind of qualities, whereas the wombat, it's just very sturdy. Okay, so we're seeing a bit of a difference in what's being discussed. So we continue on. So be easy, old tree roots companion, down there where your burrow dips in its yellow shadow, deep in the hollow. We have one mother, good brother. It is her laughter that sends you now snorting and plunging like red flood water to earth again. So what we have here is this sense of be easy, old tree roots companion, and that's another kind of camaraderie gesture where, you know, it's quite old-fashioned English, but it still comes across where he's really trying to emphasize this companionship and, you know, relationship between the wombat and the persona, in that he appreciates it. Down there where your burrow dips in its yellow shadow, deep in the hollow. So he's talking about, you know, the fact that where the wombat is living in the burrow. And then we have this continuation of this idea of nature. We have one mother, good brother. It is her laughter that sends you now snorting and plunging like red flood water to earth again. So he's saying we have one mother. This is the reference here to Mother Nature. And then we have this good brother. So again, there's this sense of a relationship between the wombat and the persona, which we haven't seen before. And we have this personification of Mother Nature's laughter, and that is just the sounds and all the elements of nature that send, you know, and it's her laughter and the sounds that she is making that is, you know, forcing the wombat out of its burrow and, back into the burrow and snorting and plunging. Okay, so like red flood water, so like a flood, it just rushes and gushes, and that's the way that the wombat has then turned and headed back to earth again. So what we see is the persona sees this wombat, pops out of the ground, looking around, you know, working everything out, and then hears a sound, so goes back in and hides again. So it's kind of multi-sensory. So up here we have description, physical, colour and sound. So all those three elements come together to emphasise this scenario with the wombat. It's quite evocative. So this imagery is really evoking this sense of the companionship and the connection that the wombat and the persona have. But it is also, again, about observing nature. Douglas Stewart, hopefully you've gathered by now, was all about observing nature and looking at these things in a different way. So the wombat is part of nature, it's living amongst it, and it's interacting. And this is something, again, that Douglas Stewart's trying to highlight through this poem. So the reason why this is distinctive is that this wombat is able to be part and, you know, work in sync with the landscape around it, and the persona is then distanced and must view. And we really need to see that that's what makes these poems distinctive. And this is shown quite well in this, is that Douglas Stewart wants us to see that we are observing nature, that we are not part of it, but there are all these other amazing and fantastic things that are part of nature. So that is where we are in terms of Wombat, and we'll look at it further in class, but hopefully you've gathered and aren't too overwhelmed again by this, you know, description of nature.